for patent infringement under 35 USC 271 E1, in which any activity that you're doing, which is for the purpose of preparing data for submission to the FDA, or any activity that's reasonably related to that is exempt or is basically not an act of infringement. So FTO issues with respect to third-party IP, again, at this stage are not going to be very much of an issue. So again, mostly at the early stage, focus on chain of title issues, developing a broad patent portfolio, but not necessarily focusing on specific claims, and not worrying so much about third-party IP. Once you're in the mid-stage, things change pretty dramatically. Lead candidates and products have now been identified. You're likely in later stages of phase 1 and into phase 2 clinical trials. Here, hopefully by now, the chain of title issues should all have been ironed out. Everybody should be signed up, and there shouldn't be any issues with respect to who owns what. Nevertheless, you should be periodically monitoring that there aren't any scientists or technicians coming out of the blue and saying, no, I contributed to that technology, and so you want to be very vigilant to ensure proper inventorship is taken care of or is documented. Again, at this point, you also want to be very keenly aware of the IP rights that are coming into and out of your company. And one of the ways that frequently happens is through both non-disclosure agreements and through material transfer agreements, and potentially through joint development agreements. So anytime you, as a mid-stage company, are providing your technology to a third party to evaluate, for example, you want to be extremely cautious in how you word the material transfer agreements, because you may be providing that partner with your technology, and they may come up with a loophole, or a sort of a very small loop of technology that turns out to be very important and critical for you to exercise your technology going forward, and you may have to jump through their hoop. In other words, you don't want to create an FTO bottleneck. So you want to make sure that you have the proper rights going forward. And at this point, because you have a good understanding of what your product is, this is the point where you really want to think about how to build your patent thicket, and by pursuing patent applications and claims of various scope, and which actually sort of are picture claims to cover your actual candidates and active pharmaceutical ingredients, as well as methods of use and manufacture. You also want to start utilizing the confidential information from and results that are resulting from your clinical trials. The biological readouts, for example, that you're getting from biological samples and patient samples can be a very valuable source of innovation, and can be used to create claims of a variety of different scopes that will increase the value of your drug development franchise. Yeah, I'll just move on. So at this stage, also freedom to operate issues become sort of key. So because you understand what your product is and what your technology is going forward, you can do much more effective and much more specific freedom to operate searches, and find those third-party patents which are likely to be a major issue for you. And now is the time to deal with them. So either you're going to want to approach the patent holder and attempt to get a license, perhaps get a non-infringement or invalidity opinion from counsel, or you may want to attack the patent through IPR or PGR. The bottom line here is that the longer that you wait and the more that you invest in bringing your drug candidate forward through clinical development, the more you lose leverage vis-a-vis the patentee. The patentee knows that the longer time goes on, they can't enforce the patent against you because you're still in the safe harbor period. But the more promising your drug candidate becomes, the more valuable it becomes, and the higher the price you'll likely have to pay to a third-party patent holder who's holding a critical piece of intellectual property. So while you're in phase 1 and phase 2, you still have you can still argue that, look, this is all early stage technology. Who knows if it's going to turn out to be anything? And your ultimate leverage in any negotiation is to be able to say, I'm walking away. Whoops, I'm walking away. I don't need that IP. But if you're in phase 3 and your product looks like it's going to be a blockbuster, that critical piece of IP will be very, very expensive. And at this point, you're also going to be increasingly paying attention to cataloging and protecting your know-how. In biotech companies and pharma companies, there's obviously patents are a big deal, but the know-how and the clinical data that's generated is also extremely valuable. And given the times that we're living in with cyber attacks and hacking attacks, investing in solid cybersecurity measures is of critical importance. And certainly talking with an attorney that focuses his practice in that, or their practice in that space. So in the late stage strategy, hopefully chain of title issues are all gone. Shouldn't really be any at this stage. Patentability, again, this is sort of where famous evergreening comes in, where there's new and non-obvious types of observations that are being made through clinical readouts and clinical trials or through various types of formulation. Those can be very, very important to claim in new patent applications to continue to extend your effective patent term. And obviously you're going to be watching your annuities and maintenance fees, and from the freedom to operate issue, you're going to be wanting to monitor in real time, getting weekly updates, having a service or a firm monitor through keyword searches all published patent applications and issued patents for any type of IP that could be an issue for you. And to the extent that you see patents that pop up that are an issue, you want to make sure you deal with them right away. We now have an opportunity in the U.S. to make third-party submissions of prior art in patent applications during third-party patent applications during prosecution. We obviously have the inter-parties review, post-grant review mechanisms available for attacking patents post-issuance. And these are all very effective ways to remove and deal with third-party art prior to any sort of district court litigation. And so from a perspective of assuming your product is now on the market, you have a patent and that covers your product, and you are protecting your franchise, you want to make sure that you go through your own portfolio and understand where the weak points are, and this has to be done obviously in a very limited circle of people and under a high degree of privileged confidentiality, to make sure one understands where the weaknesses are. You don't want to be, for example, enforcing a patent that you know is invalid. You could open yourself up to antitrust damages. And at this point also other types of exclusivities are going to become much, much more important. And in particular I'm referring to regulatory exclusivities relating to the FDA. So for example, if your drug is approved and it was a new chemical entity, the FDA won't approve abbreviated new drug application, for example, for 5 years following approval. If your drug is an orphan drug, meaning that it addresses a very small population of patients, the FDA will grant 7 years of market exclusivity for that. There's 3 years of exclusivity for brand new indications. And the big sort of daddy of them all is the 12 years of exclusivity for biologics. So when you're developing an innovator biologic, in all likelihood, or there's a very high likelihood, that by the time this exclusivity has expired, you probably don't have any patents covering your product anymore. So this 12 years of exclusivity is going to be, is very valuable, because likely your patents are going to be expiring sometime before this 12 years is up. So you're going to be relying on that. And the barrier to market entry for biologics is much higher than for creating a generic drug. On the biologic side, you generally are going to have to do some clinical trials, and trying to reverse engineer a protein is much more complicated and complex than a small molecule. So ANDA preparation for a generic version of a drug is in and of itself a 6-month. So many of you are probably familiar with Martin Shkreli of Turing Pharmaceuticals, who purchased the rights of an FDA-approved drug for a particular orphan indication for a very small number of patients. The drug had a cost of like $1.50 a pill, and once he bought the rights, he increased the price, or his company increased the price to like $15 a pill, and it caused a lot of outrage. And people immediately said, well, it's patents. Patents are at fault again here, resulting in high drug prices. But the irony of the situation was, of course, that there were no patents involved at all in that situation. Patents had long since expired, and indeed there were actually no regulatory exclusivities available anymore either. The orphan drug exclusivity had also expired. So it was just the fact that it would take another pharmaceutical manufacturer at least a year to create a new generic and formulate it and get it on the market, and with enough incentive that it actually makes sense to compete in the space and to justify that investment with no exclusivity. That was sufficient enough for Turing Pharmaceuticals to be able to, make this outrageous increase in price as it was perceived to be, because the additional barriers to market entry were basically time and ANDA preparation and lack of market incentive. So with that, a couple of slides here on Cyfarth, but I'll spare you that, and thank you for your attention.